Everyone mocked her human guard until the assassins turned around and ran. The lights went out 3 seconds before the alarms should have started, and that is how I knew something was wrong. I am Claire Whitfield, daughter of a ruling family on a space station far from any human world, and on that night, I learned that the man everyone laughed at was the only reason I am still alive to tell this story. His name was Daniel Ashby. He came to guard me 6 months earlier, and from the very first day, nobody in the palace took him seriously. He was quiet, he was plain. He did not have the sharp claws or the armored skin of the other guards from other worlds. He was just a man, standing by my door, saying almost nothing, watching everything. I remember the first time I saw him. I turned to my advisor, a tall man named Victor, and said, "This must be a joke." Victor smiled and told me the humans had a saying, "The most dangerous creature is the one that does not know it should be afraid." I laughed at that. Everyone laughed at that. Nobody laughed harder than the palace guards, tall and strong and covered in shining armor, who called him the soft one behind his back. For months, Daniel stood outside my room and took every insult without a single word. Guards would bump into him on purpose. Nobles would whisper jokes as he passed. Once, during a formal dinner, a proud lord named Gareth threw a cup at his head just to see if he would flinch. Daniel caught it out of the air without even looking, set it down gently, and kept watching the room like nothing happened. Everyone laughed that night, including me. I did not understand what I had just seen. I only understood that he never reacted, and that made him even easier to mock. One evening, I asked him why he never got angry. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. He said that anger takes energy, and he only had so much of it, so he saved it for watching, not for feeling hurt by words. I did not understand him then. I thought he was simply weak, someone who had given up on defending his own pride. I stopped thinking about him after that. He became like a piece of furniture to me, something that opened doors and stood quietly in the background of my busy life. That was my mistake. There was one afternoon, a few weeks before everything changed, when I finally saw a small hint of what he truly was. A young trainer named Oliver, who taught combat skills to the newer guards, decided to test Daniel in front of a small crowd, just for fun. Oliver was strong, fast, and proud of his skill, and he expected an easy win against a man everyone assumed was harmless. He struck first, without warning, expecting Daniel to stumble backward in surprise. Daniel simply was not there when the strike landed. He had already stepped aside, so smoothly that most people in the crowd did not even notice he had moved, until Oliver was already stumbling forward into empty space. Daniel did not strike back. He did not embarrass Oliver further. He simply steadied him with one hand, said nothing, and returned to his quiet position near the wall. Oliver laughed it off in front of the others, calling it luck, but I noticed something different in his eyes afterward, something that looked almost like unease. I noticed it too, though at the time, I told myself it meant nothing. I told myself Daniel had simply gotten fortunate. I did not want to admit that maybe I had misjudged him from the very beginning, because admitting that would have meant admitting that I, too, had been unfair to him for months, without any real reason. The night everything changed was the night of the peace signing, when every important family from every corner of our world gathered in the Grand Hall to celebrate a new agreement between old rivals. Security that night was relaxed because everyone believed no one would dare cause trouble during such an important event. I remember feeling safe, almost bored, thinking the whole evening would pass without anything interesting happening. Then the lights dimmed. Not flickered, not dimmed slowly like a power problem, but dropped all at once, the way lights drop when someone has planned it carefully. I felt Daniel's hand on my shoulder before I even understood what was happening. He pulled me down and sideways, away from the open floor, just half a second before a shadow stepped out from a side corridor that led to the kitchens. There were 3 of them. I did not know who they were at first, only that they moved without sound, wearing dark clothing built to hide them from cameras and sensors. Later I learned they were professional agents, the kind hired for the most difficult and dangerous jobs. the kind almost nobody ever survives facing. I opened my mouth to call for help, to scream for the palace guard standing so proudly near the entrance, but before I could make a sound, Daniel was already moving. He did not shout. He did not try to look big or frightening the way our warriors always did before a fight. He simply crossed the space between himself and the first stranger so quickly that it did not look fast until it was already finished. The first stranger was on the ground, unable to continue, before I even understood what Daniel had done. The second stranger reacted fast, faster than I thought anyone could react, and came at Daniel with a weapon meant to end a fight quickly. Daniel caught his arm, turned it in a way that made the stranger drop the weapon immediately, and the fight was over for him too, all within a few seconds. The third stranger, the one who seemed to be leading the other two, did not attack at all. I want to explain this part clearly, because when I tell this story to others, they often think I am adding drama to make it more exciting. I am not. The third stranger, the leader, looked at Daniel standing calmly over his two partners, and then he simply turned and ran. People like him never run. Running means losing everything, being removed from every job forever, being seen as a failure by everyone in his profession. But he chose to run anyway, and I never once thought less of him for that choice. Daniel did not chase him. He let him go, then turned back to check on me, kneeling down gently to see if I was hurt. "You are bleeding," he said, pointing to a small cut on my arm that I had not even noticed until then. I could barely speak. I said, "There were 3 of them. How did you—" And I could not even finish my own sentence. He said, "There were 3 of them for a few seconds. Now there is 1, and he is somebody else's problem." The palace guards finally arrived after everything was already finished, running in with their shining armor and their loud voices, ready to be heroes for an audience that no longer needed saving. Lord Gareth, the same man who had thrown a cup at Daniel months earlier just for entertainment, walked in and saw the 2 strangers lying quietly on the floor. He looked at Daniel, standing there so calm, so unbothered, and for the first time since I had known him, Gareth said absolutely nothing at all. News about what happened that night spread quickly through every part of the palace, and then beyond it, into every circle that cared about such things. I heard later that the leader who ran gave a report to the people who had hired him, explaining exactly why he chose to leave. He said that he had faced many dangerous opponents from many different worlds, warriors bred for battle, fighters trained since childhood, but none of them ever made him feel like prey the way this one quiet man did. He said Daniel did not even look angry, and that was what frightened him most, because Daniel looked at him like a problem that had already been solved before it even began. Things changed after that night, though not in the way people might expect. Daniel did not brag. He did not remind anyone of what he had done. He did not demand apologies from those who had mocked him for months. He simply continued standing by my door, hands folded, watching the room the same way he always had. I was the one who changed. I stopped seeing him as background furniture. I started seeing what had always been there, quiet, patient, and far more capable than anyone in that palace had ever imagined. We had grown up believing that strength always looked loud and large and proud. Daniel taught me, without ever meaning to teach me anything, that real strength often hides behind silence, and that being underestimated can be its own kind of advantage. I asked him one day why he never told anyone what he was truly capable of. He said, "Nobody ever asked me what I could do. They only asked why I did not react to their words." Those turned out to be very different questions. I think about that answer often. I think about how an entire palace filled with proud families and long traditions looked at one quiet man and saw nothing worth noticing, right up until 3 trained agents looked at that very same man and saw something worth running from. After that night, nobody in the palace ever mocked him again. Not the guards, not the nobles, not even Gareth. The guards who once called him the soft one started calling him something new, a name in their own language that roughly meant the calm before the storm, and they said it with the kind of respect they rarely gave to outsiders. Daniel never asked for the new name. He never seemed to care whether people respected him or laughed at him. He simply kept doing his work, standing quietly, watching carefully, protecting without needing anyone to notice. And that, I have come to understand, was always the most powerful thing about him. Not the speed of his movements, not the skill in his hands, but the quiet, steady calm that made everyone forget to be afraid of him until the moment fear was the only reasonable feeling left. I still see him standing outside my door some nights, calm as ever, watching the hallway the way he always has. And every time I do, I remember that the loudest warning signs are not always the ones worth trusting, and the quietest people in the room are sometimes the ones who could end everything in seconds, if they ever needed to. Years later, when younger members of our family asked me to tell the story of that night, I always started the same way. I told them to look closely at the people they judge too quickly, because appearance rarely tells the whole truth about anyone. I told them about Oliver, who learned his lesson early and quietly, and about Gareth, who never threw another object at anyone again for the rest of his life. I told them about the leader who ran, and how his choice to walk away, rather than continue a fight he could not win, showed a kind of wisdom that many of our own proud warriors never learned. Most of all, I told them about Daniel, who never wanted praise, who never asked to be remembered as a hero, and who returned to his quiet post by my door the very next morning, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. When I once asked him if he ever felt proud of what he did that night, he only shook his head gently and said that protecting someone was not something to feel proud about. It was simply something to do properly, without excuses, and without needing anyone to notice. That answer stayed with me longer than the memory of the fight itself. It taught me that true strength rarely announces itself, and that the people worth trusting are often the ones who never ask to be trusted at all. Even now, whenever new guards arrive at our palace, proud of their armor and their reputation, I remind them gently not to judge the quiet ones too quickly, because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is simply the one who never felt the need to prove it.